Hello and welcome to Unit 1.1, Video 9 for Mr. McGeehee's 9th grade biology class at Arizona School for the Arts. This video series follows the biology coloring book by Robert D. Griffin, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at carbohydrates. Before we begin, please take a minute or two to review covalent compounds and the type of bonds formed by carbon. Carbohydrates are molecules that are formed by a combination of water and carbon molecules. Each carbohydrate contains a specific ratio of elements. For every one carbon atom, there are 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. What this means is that they have a special chemical formula, which we can write like this, where N, in this example, equals the number of carbon atoms. So if N equals 6, then our chemical formula for a carbohydrate with 6 carbons is C6H12O6. This is the chemical formula for the carbohydrate that we call glucose. All carbohydrates can have isomers, which means that they are chemical compounds that have the same chemical formula but different structures. So glucose is an example of an isomer. Glucose is a simple sugar. It has a total of 6 carbons, but those 6 carbons can be arranged in different forms. They can take a long chain form, or they can take a ring form. It turns out that there are even 2 forms of the ring shape of glucose. If you had a solution of glucose in water and counted up all the molecules of glucose, what you'd find is that about 36% of them are the alpha glucose type, and 64% of them are called the beta glucose type. If you look carefully, what you'll see is that the difference between these 2 types of glucose is the position of the OH group on the number 1 carbon in the ring. What's interesting is that while these molecules are floating around in the solution of water, they're actually constantly changing between the 2 different kinds of isomers. So an alpha glucose can easily change into a beta glucose. The reason that at any given time there are more beta glucose molecules in solution is that the beta glucose molecule is actually much more stable than the alpha glucose. When we have a simple sugar like glucose, we call it a monosaccharide. Fructose is another monosaccharide. And what I want you to notice is that each monosaccharide has the components of water molecules built into them. So by doing some chemistry called a dehydration synthesis, we can actually join 2 monosaccharides into a disaccharide. In this case, it's called sucrose. The result is a water molecule. Dehydration synthesis is used to build larger molecules, and every time a monosaccharide is added to the molecule, it releases a water molecule. The process can go the other way. You can actually take a water molecule and use it to break apart a disaccharide. This is a process called hydrolysis. Lysis means to cut, and the hydro part refers to the water. So it's literally using a water molecule to break a molecule into 2 smaller parts. Take a second and see if you can research on the internet the monosaccharides that contribute to some common disaccharides. For example, sucrose is a disaccharide that's composed of glucose and fructose. Complete a chart like this in your notes and be sure to show it to me in class. Polysaccharides are long chains of monosaccharides. They're built 1 monosaccharide at a time by dehydration synthesis. Oftentimes, they're used for energy storage, or sometimes structural support in plants and animals and other living things. Here's an example of 3 important polysaccharides. The first is in the middle. It's called cellulose. Cellulose is what plants use most of their glucose for. The cellulose is long chains of glucose that are made into rigid fibers that are used to make the cell wall of plant cells. Plants make another kind of polysaccharide called starch. Starch is for energy storage. A smaller portion of the glucose that a plant produces will be stored as starch. When animals eat plants, oftentimes they'll break down the starch first, and then microbes that live in their guts will help to break down the cellulose. And those glucose molecules enter their bloodstream. The animal doesn't want to have all of that glucose sitting around in its bloodstream at one time, so it stores it as its own storage polysaccharide called glycogen. Glycogen is often called animal starch, and it can be found in cells of the liver. Well, that's the end of this video. Please complete the corresponding review questions and be prepared to show your notes in class. Thanks, and have a great evening.